My colleague Tanya Goudsouzian is an analyst for us. She's also a journalist, and you've covered Afghanistan for about 15 years or so now. This is quite unusual. As Ali Latifi was telling us from Kabul, the president has, of course, a security detail which checks every venue the day before he goes there. But for a suicide bomber to ram the gates of that venue, the Taliban are carrying out their deadly threat to hit election rallies.
Well, their objective is clear. It's voter intimidation. They have made no secret of their opposition to the elections. In fact, last month, right when the campaigning began, their spokesman issued a communique threatening the Afghan people. Anyone who would get anywhere near an election rally or an election-related activity would be considered a target. So they're pretty much making good on their word. They attacked They targeted the president's campaign today, but just a few weeks ago, they targeted his vice presidential running mate, Amrullah Saleh's office, resulting in significant casualties.
Throughout the peace talks that have been happening in Doha between representatives of the Taliban and the US government, I've continued to ask the question, what does the Taliban eventually want? Does it want a place in the political arena? And that's happened in other countries in the world. You think especially of Northern Ireland, where the IRA are now Sinn Féin and they have seats in governments. They may not take them up in parliament, that's another discussion. But I keep getting the answer. The Taliban don't want a part in the political scene of Afghanistan. So why would they disrupt the elections?
Well, you're absolutely right. They were invited to run in the elections and they chose not to. Their end game is clear. They are very much against the government of Afghanistan. They consider this a puppet regime and they're saying they don't recognize it. So there was talk that of the possibility of postponing these elections. There was talk of canceling them even. Some Afghan opposition politicians have continued to call for that, saying that this is not the right time. The Afghan government has said, no, this is what the Afghan people wanted. They wanted a democracy and they want to continue with the democratic process. And that's exactly what they're doing by moving ahead with this election. In fact, the optics of it are difficult to ignore. President Ghani's election campaign slogan is state builders. So what they're trying to do is continue the state building process that was begun about 18 years ago, whereas the Taliban is saying, well, we don't agree with this.
It's still to be determined about whether people are going to have the courage, because it takes courage to go and cast your ballot when there's intimidation at this level and it could cost you your life. So let's wait until September the 28th and the election itself. But looking further ahead to any potential peace that Afghanistan could have, it has to, of course, involve the Americans, who have got more than 10,000 troops there. Those talks are paused at the moment. Do you think they're going to resume anytime soon? But possibly, even more importantly, could Donald Trump pull some American troops out of Afghanistan before there's a deal done with the Taliban?
Well, I think it's not unreasonable to expect for the talks to resume. The Americans still want to pull out, partially at least, and the Taliban still want the Americans out. So I think it's just a matter of time before those talks resume. But I don't believe that President Trump calling off the talks had any bearing on what the Taliban is doing now. They were going to do this whatever the case. And the object being to suppress voter turnout and to turn around at the end and say there was a low voter turnout and the outcome should be questioned. This is what they're hoping to achieve. But it should be stressed that NATO, the EU, and Resolute Support have all expressed support for the election.
Okay. Tanya, thank you very much for coming in. Tanya Goudsouzian with an analysis on what's happening in Afghanistan in the run-up to the election later this month.